Good evening, friends. I hope you all are doing fine. And this episode, we will be discussing about our inscriptions. The first of them we will be discussing is the Rock Edict-XIII of Ashoka, which is the most single important document of Indian history. I'll discuss the general details about the inscription, where it is, what has Ashoka said about it. Would also look at the mention of Greek kings in this inscription, and then we would also be looking at the fact that why this important piece of inscription uh, is the single most important document as far as Indian chronological history is concerned. So we'll just look at the photograph first, and this is the actual rock edict. If you could, I will just magnify it a little bit, and you can see the fact that this inscription is in a form, has been written in a giant rock, and the language here is Prakrit, which was the main language of the people of the 3rd century BC in India. And the script is the Ashokan Brahmi, from which all other scripts have evolved, including Devanagari. So this is about this inscription, and we this inscription is at Dhauli. So the Dhauli is just nearby the state capital Bhubaneswar, and there is this big hill in which they have made a Shanti Stupa, and from that hill, nearby this hill, is this giant rock containing this important piece of document. But before we go into everything, we'll just look at a quote, which is some people have. I have taken this quote from Hamlet, and this describes Ashoka's situation, his mental strength, his mental uh, thinking after he saw the carnage at Kalinga. Never did the king sigh, but with a general moan. Act 3, Scene 3, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. So this is what Ashoka's mental thing was when he saw the carnage at Ashoka, and I have tried to equate something from Shakespeare to describe Ashoka's feelings at that point of time. And this is the photograph of the actual battlefield of Kalinga, and you could see this has been taken from that Shanti Stupa, that hill, and from that hill you could see this view in front of you, and the river which you are seeing here is called the Daya River, and as per accounts, this river ran red with blood. So much carnage, so much people were killed during that battle, and it's a flat plain. Both the armies would employ their strengths, will array themselves in a full battle array, and would just fight. And this river, Daya River, actually ran red with the blood as per the accounts. This is the actual Shanti Stupa which has been made, and it is on top of a hill from where you could see the surroundings. So we will just look at some of the things regarding the battle, the general points about the inscription. But first of all, we will look at this battle and how it is important in transforming Ashoka. Uh, we have been told in textbooks that Ashoka converted to Buddhism after he saw the carnage in at Kalinga. The fact of the matter is, Ashoka was already a Buddhist 2.5 years before Kalinga, and that nobody is saying that, but himself. Ashoka is saying that in his Rock Edict-I at Maski. Maski is a place in Karnataka, and he simply says that he was a Buddha Shakya. Buddha Shakya translates into a lay follower of Buddhism. And he mentions that he was Buddhist 2.5 years before. Now the Musky inscription is about 260 BCE, just a year after Kalinga. So if you look at the Battle of Kalinga, which was fought in 261, and go back 2.5 years, Ashoka was already a Buddhist 264 or 263 BCE. It was only after seeing the carnage at Kalinga, Ashoka became a zealous follower of Buddhism. Then he started his religious journeys, his control of the Buddhist Sangha, and all other things. But he was already a Buddhist at the time of Battle of Kalinga. And the battle itself is a landmark in the sense that so much blood was spilled, and it is written in the inscription as to how many were killed and how many were deported. Megasthenes, about 40 years before, in about 300 BCE, when he came to the court of Chandragupta Maurya, he mentions that the king of Kalinga was protected by a standing army of 60,000 infantry, 1,000 cavalry, and 700 elephants. Now, Megasthenes was writing it in about 300 BCE, so in the next 40 years, this strength would have increased, and and uh, and of course, Mauryan strength would also have increased. Plutarch states about 600,000 infantry of Mauryans, but that infantry and that army would also have increased by the time 40 years later, in about 261 BCE. So we'll just look at some general things about this inscription. This is dated to year 256 BCE, year 13 of Ashoka's rule. And Ashoka speaks here about his conquest of Kalinga. Kalinga is in modern day Orissa and parts of northern Andhra Pradesh. And this region was left unconquered by Chandragupta and by Bindusara. And this battle was actually the only political event of Ashoka's reign or Ashoka's span. He ruled for about 37 years between 269 to 232 BCE, and this incident was the only political incident of his reign. He also mentions the number of casualties of war, and he states simply that 100,000 people have died and 150,000 have been deported. So we know the casualties of war here, and we'll go into this number of casualties of details in a separate section just in a while. So Ashoka expresses remorse for the killing and destruction. He also says, and I quote, "One who does wrong should be forgiven as far as it is possible." He, in spite of adhering to non-violence after this battle, Ashoka still warns the forest tribes that what he is trying to say should be listened to and should be adhered to by the forest tribes. And if they do not listen, they do not obey his orders, they will all be killed. He simply states that. He considers victory by Dhamma. He mentions Dhamma. Dhamma is a Pali word, Sanskrit, it's Dharma, of course. And Dharma is the foremost victory. Now, if you could go through Arthashastra by Kautilya, Kautilya mentions types of victories by a king. So there is Asura Vijaya, there is a Pishacha Vijaya, but there is also a Dharma Vijaya. So a king should always strive to uh, win the hearts of the people, or rather than conquer them by sword and bloodshed. So that is what Dharma Vijaya is. That is, by your own good deeds, which are beneficial to the people of your country, you win their hearts. That is what Dharma Vijaya means. Ashoka also mentions the southern limits of his borders by naming Cholas, Satyaputras, which are taken to be Pandyas, and Kerala Putras, which are taken to be Cheras. Now, this is the first inscription where you could find the name of Cholas, Kerala Putras, and Satyaputras. Yes, literary accounts we have before that, but This is the first inscriptional account where we find the names of Chola, and then Cheras and Pandyas and others. Again, he mentions five Greek kings whom he sent as ambassadors. Those not as ambassadors, you can say they were ambassadors, but they were actually, he sent these ambassadors to propagate his theory of Buddhism among them. So he sent these ambassadors to five kings of the Greek world, ruling from present day Iran to Macedon and Egypt and Cyrene. Ashoka says, and I quote, "People hear of my Dhamma, precepts, and instructions and follow Dhamma." Last but not the least, he says, "The inscription has been engraved so that Ashoka's sons and grandsons only consider victory by Dhamma to be true conquest." So the policy of conquest through sword was disbanded after this victory by Ashoka. He considered Dharma Vijaya to be the most important part of a king's life, and he instructs his sons and grandsons not to conquer any new region by sword, but by simply to win these regions by their good deeds or Dharma Vijay. So we are looking at the casualties of war in Ashoka's time, and Ashoka states that 100,000 have perished and 150,000 have been deported. But Ashoka also mentions in this inscriptions about the society which was there at that time, which consisted of Sramanas, Brahmins, merchants, etc. And the losses of war actually he has calculated on a most modern basis, and these losses fall into three categories, and these are the losses inflicted on the combatants by death, wounds, and capture, the grief to the families of the combatants, and the suffering caused to the friends of bereaved. Now, this is a society, Ashoka, we can go much deeper into that. This is a society which is based on a joint family system of those days, about 2300 odd years ago. And such a society actually comprises of religious scholars, Brahmins, regular households, cultivators, merchants, etc. And they all live in a happy harmony and domestic and social life with the proper relations towards their parents, friends, preceptors, servants, etc. And this is an example of a typical Hindu family. So, and they are so closely knit together that it is no wonder that the war affects the civilian population almost as much as those who are sent to the front. And this reality is there since Ashokan times till date. We also, in our modern times, when we see the casualties of war or casualties in a conflict of our army, the Indian army, for example, we also feel affected. We may not have any direct relations to those people who are fighting at the front, but somehow we are all connected directly or indirectly, and we all get affected and get sad when a brave army jawan or someone dies at the front. So, and this is there since the ancient times, and this affects these deaths, these injuries, they affect the civilian population almost as those who sent into the front, and which include the bereaved relations of the dead and the friends of the survivors. The war affects us all in a bad way, in a sad way. So that is how war is. Anyways, so this is how Ashoka is most modern in his computations of the war casualties. Uh, Dead, 100,000 dead, 150,000 deported. That makes us about 250,000 people, but affected would be double. So about 500,000 people or more would be affected by all this carnage. And Ashoka has not said about how many of his soldiers were died. He does not mention it. He just mentions the casualties which he and his army did to the Kalingan army. He does not say as to how many of his own people has died, and that would be into thousands. So their families will also be affected. So this is what Ashoka is trying to say. He is trying to compute on a most modern basis as to what is the effect of war. That is what Ashoka is trying to say by this inscription. So the next part is the names of the Greek kings mentioned in this inscription. So we have the first name of Amityoka. This is the name Ashoka mentions of Antiochus II Theos. He was the king of Babylon and Persia who ruled between 261 to 246 BCE. He was the son of Antiochus I Soter. Friends, you would well remember in our when I was doing about Chandragupta Maurya, and Antiochus I Soter was the son of Seleucus Nicator. Now Seleucus, as per the legends, gave his daughter to Chandragupta Maurya. So we can see that these Seleucids were actually relatives of Ashoka. And then he mentions Turamaya. Turamaya is Ptolemy II Philadelphus. He was the king of Egypt and the son of Ptolemy I Soter. Ptolemy I Soter was the general of Alexander who carved out his own kingdom in Egypt after Alexander had died. So Turamaya, he also sent his ambassador to him. Then we have the name of Amitakini or the Antigonus to Gonatas, who was the king of Macedonia and ruled between 277 to 239 BCE. We also have the name of Maga or Maga of Cyrene. He was the son of Philip and Bernice, and he ruled between 276 to 250 BCE. Another one is Alikasudara. He was the Alexander of Pyrrhus, ruled between 272 to 242 BCE. Now, friends, you would see the word Alexandra, which means Alexander. Now, again, this is the first time that the mention of the word Alexander or Alexandra is mentioned for the first time in any Indian inscription. This translates. There is a variant of Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, Alexandra becomes Alakshendra. And this Alexander of Pyrrhus was the son of the legendary Pyrrhus of Epirus, who between 280 to 272 BCE fought many battles with a Roman Republic. And we have the term of Pyrrhic victory because of Pyrrhus of Epirus, because he did win against Romans many battles, but his casualties were more than that of Romans. So we have this term called Pyrrhic victory, which means a victory achieved at a great loss. Now, this is interesting. So we have some interesting facts about this inscription. So the first time we have already discussed, but this gives the total casualties of the Battle of Kalinga: 100,000 dead and 150,000 deported, and many more injured, many more affected. Total casualties list directly or indirectly crosses 500,000 easily. It also mentions the year in which Ashoka attacked Kalinga. So he mentions year 8 of his from his coronation. Now Ashoka was coronated in about 269 BCE. So this goes to about 261 BCE when this battle of Kalinga happened. And this is the first time again in inscriptions we hear about an Indian king sending his ambassadors to outside the borders of India. We have the literary evidences of Chandragupta Maurya and Bindusara sending his ambassadors to the Greek kings, but in inscription, this is the first one. Again, hear the word yojana for the first time in this inscription. So this yojan is a unit of measurements. If you want to measure distance, so yojan is the word which was used by the Indians. So we have the reference of this yojana in Mahabharata and even Ramayana. So in Ramayana, they say that it is mentioned that Hanuman, God Hanuman, he went to Lanka, which was 100 yojanas from his base. But what is this yojana? How can we modernly calculate it? Ashoka mentions this in his inscription. So he says that distance between his kingdom and the kingdom of Antiochus II of Theos, whose capital was at Babylon, uh, uh, and he says that it was about 600 yojanas. Uh, if you calculate the distance between Patna, or modern day Patna, and Babylon in Iraq, it comes to about 4,000 kilometers. So one yojana is equal to about 7 kilometers. So 600 yojanas would mean about 4,000 kilometers, which is the distance between Pataliputra and Babylon. So now this most important part, the chronology of Indian history and the Rock Edict-XIII. So the text indicates the year in which it was published. Friends, so this is about 256 BCE, year 13 of Ashoka's rule. So as we had discussed, Ashoka was coronated in 269 BCE, right? So we have got some chronology here. Ashoka's father Bindusara was ruled for 25 years as per Puranas. So he ruled between 298 to 273 BCE. Now, friends, you would ask that there is a gap of 4 years between 273 BC and 269 BC. If Ashoka was coronated, he should have been coronated in 273 because that is when Bindusara died. So, why there is a gap of 4 years? There is a gap of 4 years simply because these 4 years were involved in a civil war between various Mauryan princes, the sons of Bindusara. And as per certain traditions, Bindusara has 101 sons and daughters. And these 4 years were involved in a battle of succession, in which Ashoka emerged victorious. He did kill few of his brothers, including the elder one Susima, who was the successor to Bindusara, but he had him removed or killed, and then he became the sole emperor of the Mauryan empire by 269 BCE. So we have got these dates. Now we'll go further a little bit. Bindusara's father, Chandragupta Maurya, ruled for 24 years between 322 to 298 BCE, right? Because we have discussed this. And then Alexander attacked India between 327 to 325 BCE. So this entire chronology, right from Alexander's invasion, Chandragupta's reign, Bindusara's reign, and Ashoka's reign, these can be calculated via this inscription, and that is why it is a very, very important document if you are looking for the dates. There is also one more thing, and which is that these kings which I had mentioned, we these Greek kings whom Ashoka sent his ambassadors, they were all alive between 277 to 239 BCE. So that gives you the timeline of Ashoka as well. Ashoka ruled for 37 years, that is between 269 to 232 BCE. And all these kings whom Ashoka sent, his ambassadors, they were all there between in Ashoka's time. And if someone tells you, or I mean, there have been lots of things going on regarding the Indian chronology. There have been people who have been trying to say that Chandragupta Maurya and Ashoka they existed 1400 BCE. 1,000 years before their actual existence. If they say that, you give this inscription to them to read, and they would know what they are talking about. So, friends, this is the. I'll end here with this Rock Edict 13. It is the most, as I repeated earlier, and I'm repeating it again. This is the single most important document of Indian history, where you could find Ashoka's talking to you, talking about the carnage at Kalinga, talking about the number of casualties, talking about how it affected him, and also mentions his ambassadors who were sent to the Greek kingdoms in the west, and how this is the most incredible document as far as chronological details of Indian history is concerned. So this is about Rock Edict 13, and I thank you all for all your comments, your support, and please subscribe to this channel, like this video. If you have any questions, you can contact me. I have put my Twitter account details in the description box, and you can contact me there. You can contact me via here itself, and we'll be back again next week with another episode of ancient Indian history. Until then, I love you all. We'll meet again next week. Thank you so much.